All right, welcome everyone to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. I am very proud to present to today's moderator, who is my friend and colleague in the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, where he recently joined our team as a postdoctoral fellow. He also is the managing director of the Comparative and International Education Society, or CIES, which recently moved its headquarters to the Office of Global Learning at FIU. Earning a PhD in Educational Studies from McGill University in Montreal, he also holds a Master's in Humanities and a Bachelor's in Literary Studies from the University of Texas at Dallas. Formerly a high school English language arts teacher, his diverse research interests and publications include a comparative education in global perspective, interdisciplinary and multiple education, social justice and equity, teacher education and professionalization, and assessment literacy. At the college level, he has led courses in multicultural education, research methods, English language arts, science education, and professional ethics for teachers. So definitely a true professional and scholar in the area of education and diverse and multicultural education in particular. His recent scholarship includes Redefining Multicultural Education, Inclusion, and the Right to be Different, which he has here probably for him to hold up, but I'll hold it up since I just said it. A cool cover. And Contributions to Qualities of Education in a Globalized World. My favorite part of his bio, of course, though, once you hear it, is that he is also a Jeopardy champion. So I give to you today's moderator, Mariusz.
Hello, everyone. So yes, my name is Mariusz Galczynski. I will be going through ways you can get in touch with me throughout the presentation. So, if you need links to the Jeopardy episodes, I can hook you up. But what I'm excited to be talking about with you today is the opening ceremony of the Olympics that recently happened over the summer. It doesn't matter if you didn't watch them. Yes. Turn it on. Isn't it on now? Okay, now? Yes. All right, now it's super loud. Okay. All right, so it's okay if you didn't watch the opening because I'll be showing you just some highlights and some of the intentions of the planners in terms of what they were trying to accomplish. And really what we'll be talking about is what an event like the Olympics opening ceremony means in terms of what it gets to show people about a culture, and what kinds of things we want to highlight about a culture, and what kinds of things we perhaps don't want to, and why we have those instincts, whether to highlight them or not, and where our perspective on those issues comes from. So the title of my presentation today, or our Tuesday Times Roundtable talk, and I should say that I'd like it to be as interactive as possible, so if at any time you want to jump in, or anything isn't clear, please raise your hand. Please feel free to shout things out. I'm not like Donald Trump that I only have a few phrases memorized. So I will be ready to address whatever comments you have. And the subtitle is that we'll be unpacking the ceremony. So in terms of unpacking, what do you think that even means? What's maybe a synonym we could use? Yes, we'll dissect it. We'll deconstruct it. We'll take it apart, not to come away with any right or wrong answers, but just to take some time to dwell, to simmer, what's that word, when like a slow cook on it, and marinate some ideas in our heads. And so again, I need you to help me unpack things because you're going to bring different perspectives than certainly I would. I should be honest and say that I'm not Brazilian, I'm not from South America, I actually was born in Poland and I grew up in the US in different places. I just moved here to Miami this year to join FIU from Montreal. So I have a diverse background, but honestly, I don't know all that much about Brazil. So if you do, please jump in. Okay, and hopefully you'll be wowed by the amazing PowerPoint as well. And so I'll be teaching a course definitely by the summer. So if you're in the education department or you know how to register for global learning classes, please come, tell your friends. Okay, so what we have here, if you did see, is pretty much the finale of the opening once athletes started streaming in. Bright, colorful, we have a very creative background, which at times was supposed to mimic the city of Rio de Janeiro, including the favelas. which are urban developments in the city. But let's look at just some of the things that, in case you missed it, were included in this opening ceremony. And again, this is a sporting event. So it's kind of interesting that the organizers wanted to talk about much more than just sport, and even much more than just maybe some of the things you would assume we'd talk about when we highlight Brazil and Rio de Janeiro. So one of the focuses was peace and the environment. And you had a peace sign, you had just the shape of the stage was meant to allude to ecological features. And I'm going to just go through these fast because maybe you watched it, and really that's not the point anyway. By the second half, we were talking about global warming and its effects specifically on a place like Rio de Janeiro, which has lots of coast, as we know. There were allusions to the indigenous peoples that influenced Brazilian culture as it is today, as well as the various waves of immigration of different kinds of people to Brazil that create the society that exists today. Very clearly, and by the way, these are photos taken from the official Rio 2016 site. So these are not my interpretations of what they were showing you, but literally what they wanted to show you and wanted you to get. And if you didn't get it, you could still go to the website and read along and try to interpret what that vision really was. So very clearly, a commitment to multiculturalism. So Brazil is saying to everyone in the world, we are a multicultural country. These are the people that make us up, and here's how we're interpreting it. And often intertwined with naturalistic elements. As the article that you have in front of you says, perhaps the most striking moment was Gisele Bündchen, the supermodel, also highlighting Brazilian achievements. And we're going to unpack that a little bit later, but it's part of it. And she walked across the longest stage in the world, or longest catwalk in the world, to the girl from Ipanema, the famous Brazilian song. And the theme, more or less, and this is again alluding to the concluding section, was that all Brazilians want is to be happy and to get along and have a society that's thriving, and that is felt in the music, in the passion that's shown, in the ceremony, in the colors, and so on. What's interesting, though, of course, is you have specifically in this section rap music and very clear references to living in the favelas. So any thoughts before we go on further? Did you watch? How many of you watched the ceremony? Okay, and how many of you at least watched clips on the news afterwards? So you saw something. Okay, so most people in this room. What were your impressions just having covered that, or what do you remember now that it's already 2 months later? And when was this? July, June? A few months ago. Thank you, Eric, for thinking I was a liar and using critical thinking in terms of analyzing what I was saying to you. So in case did you hear in the back what Eric said? Yes, okay. So more or less, there were rumors before it even started about what extent social issues would be addressed. And I think many of you probably heard that there were protests leading up to the Olympics pretty much until the final days. There were, comedy skits and so on. And I just wanted to, at this point, mention that part of the reason why I chose this was in the rehearsals, or this is the rumor, it's not in our article, but let's take it as it's true, is that at the end of the catwalk scene, there was supposed to be something that represented a mugging of Gisele. And this was cut like pretty much the day or two before, deciding that that wasn't going to be done in a sensitive way. So we'll come back to that, but great. What else? Okay, but I liked what you just said about you didn't necessarily get all of what they were going for just by watching it on TV. And some of that is addressed in an article, and we'll get to that, about how not only are we watching this artist's vision, or the team of artists that put this together, but we're also watching it through TV networks that are showing it to us. And depending what channel you were watching, or really perhaps on no channel, you would get really the in-depth descriptions that the organizers actually prepared for you in text online. Okay, so you liked how they didn't even stop when the athletes came, that still the message of being happy, social consciousness, the environment that we all share was still woven in. Good. And I liked also, I'm going to give you the last word, but I just want to pick off of that what I liked what you were saying is that the designers of the show were thinking about how they're representing the country. And so for a country where natural resources and the Amazon is such a large physical part of that, they didn't eliminate that in their presentation of the culture. Whereas perhaps, by contrast, if you'd watched the Chinese one, you saw different elements of their culture seen through their opening ceremony. But that's maybe too far for some of us to remember. Absolutely. Great. So this kind of opportunity doesn't come along very often, and certainly for the country that's hosting, doesn't come along very often, although Brazil did have the World Cup just 2 years before. But yes, it's an opportunity to send something out to everyone. Because my background is in education, we would consider this something that's called popular education. Like, yes, we have formal education in schools, but you also learn a lot of things about life in the world beyond the walls of the classroom. And so here's a perfect example of where you have basically a lesson being presented to you by the artists, by the organizers, a lesson about Brazil and what they want you to take away in terms of the knowledge you have about their country. So let's get into it a little bit more in terms of the article. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking little excerpts from my book, Redefining Multicultural Education and the Right to Be Different, Inclusion and the Right to Be Different, which is available at the FIU library, thanks to our global learning librarian. So in case. And then the targeted audience there really is teachers and people studying education, but we'll talk about it very broadly. So what I'm going to do is just give you I like to take quotes and then unpack them. And so I'll go back and forth between little pieces from the book as well as little pieces from the brief article you have in front of you and kind of pair them up and guide the discussion that way. Okay, so what we have and what we really just ended on with your comment is that we can conceive of the opening of the Olympics as a teachable moment for everyone, right? That we're all getting some kind of education about Brazil. And so generally teachers who believe in multicultural education feel that we should be capitalizing on any such event. Anytime you have news happening that students are already interested in, that are already talking about with their friends, with their parents, with people they run into on the street. Oh, did you see the Olympics last night? That's a chance to dig into what they saw and unpack some of the underlying themes, especially if the organizers are brave enough to really include some more complex issues that need a moment to really be reflected on. I'm sure another example are the presidential debates that you've undoubtedly been, even if you've been trying to avoid watching them, hearing about to pretty much everyone you run into, right? And so again, what's interesting in schools is that you have those people who say, we should be neutral. We shouldn't talk about that in school. Let's just stick to the math and the science and the English, and that's what we'll do. But that in itself is not a neutral position. That is a political position. That is someone saying, we don't talk about that because that doesn't belong in schools. So in a way, they're reinforcing the status quo, keeping things as they are, because they're shutting down the conversation. So again, having the background in multicultural education that I have, what we want is to encourage conversation, to encourage dialogue, not to give students answers, but to get students talking with each other so they have their own conversations and their own conclusions. And they can think critically like Eric did when he refused to believe me. And in the future, he will believe me because I'm always right. So, okay, let's take a little quote from the news article. Right? Oh, wait, let me go back to do the effect. Ooh, here it is. So you saw this? All right. So one thing that you didn't see in the pictures, but was commented on pretty widely, is that a section of the opening ceremony represented Brazil's history of slavery, in addition to the dangers of global warming and what that would do to a city like Rio de Janeiro. So in general, did any of you see the section? Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture of it, but there were people who were enacting as if they were being brought over from Africa. They had cubes on their feet being marched in and intersected with then later various waves of immigration to Brazil from other places of the world. What did you think about that? Did you have any thoughts, or were you surprised to see slavery being embedded into the opening ceremony of the Olympics? Okay, well, I'm glad you actually said that, because there are many people who work on researching issues of modern slavery and the forms that that takes nowadays too. So yes, it's not something that's been eradicated for sure. Okay, so taking off of what you said, and so again, the whole point today is not to talk about whether they did a great job of representing Brazil, because again, I don't know about Brazil, and you can draw your own conclusions. But imagine that now we were hosting the next Olympics, and we now have been given the precedent of what Rio did, and how they actually brought certain social justice issues to the forefront, or certain sensitive parts of history, or that some people feel are sensitive, and tried to work them into the show. Could we do that? What we know about the U.S. What if we're trying to represent the U.S. now? Would we do it? Could we do it? Okay, so to summarize, although Americans feel that other people are too sensitive, we are too sensitive to address real issues in something like some of us. Okay, great. Who else? Yes. Okay, so some themes could be woven in, at least to the happenings of, say, the Olympics. A precedent certainly has been set now by somewhere else, and you're saying, well, we're talking about these things anyway. There is consciousness about not only slavery, which you've been learning about since elementary school, certainly, I hope. I didn't grow up in the South, so I assume you learned about it. Okay, so what I wanted to say is this, that in the comments that you're making about Americans, about we wouldn't do this, there's a political element. And so when I teach education, we always break down that really every little thing is political. And why? Because there's power dynamics embedded in the relations and our decision-making processes. So I want you to think about that when you're saying Americans wouldn't do this, we wouldn't do this, some of you might be saying that even though you personally would be okay with it. You personally might think like, well, actually, I think you could do that in a pretty creative way, or like, I'd like to see that. So who are these we? Who are these Americans that we're talking about that are not us? There are individual people who maybe have quite strong voices, but you have voices too. And so it's important to think about that the way that we perceive what reality is and what the norm is and what we can do and cannot do is socially constructed. It's something that we make up in our minds based on the experiences that we have. But it's not objective in that there's a really truth to like, well, you can't do that. How many times have you been told by someone when they tell you like, oh, you just can't do that? Many times. And what is yes, you can, watch me, is usually what I say. But what do you mean you can't do that? Like literally unless it defies the laws of science. What do you mean you can't do that? Well, it's because it's so deeply embedded in us that there are people, again, whose voices are more powerful than ours that tell us. Often it's when you're a child and you have an older person, an adult, their voice is more powerful than yours. And so they can say, well, you can't talk about this. This is wrong. This is not something you should worry about. Or you can't do this. And they do, right? Your parents tell you what you can and can't do. But at some point you become an adult and your voice really can become as powerful as anyone else's. Okay, so I'm going to get to you in just a second, but I definitely want to. But I just want to say that let's think about again now we have a chance to make an opening ceremony. Who is this for? Is this for, and I feel like buried in what you were saying there about some people don't want to talk about this. We're talking about almost kind of like perhaps older people or older generations that are kind of making the rules for how our society functions right now. And so we have to please them in a way because they're like writing the books. But I always want you to be thinking about who are these we, who are people who are Americans, or what you said, I forget how you said it at the beginning, but another variation of they. And it's again, who is this? Who are these people? They're always people, individual people, and some of them have decision-making power and others don't. Okay, and so what I want to pull from that is, again, I brought up the idea of popular education, that this is a chance to teach the world something. Maybe we're also not learning about just Brazil in watching the opening ceremony, but when we unpack it and we start applying it to our context and drawing comparisons and asking questions, we're also learning new things about ourselves. And I think your question was great too about where do these rules come from anyway, and like what do we have to do? What I would add to that is that someone somewhere decided we're spending a lot of money on it. So Are we going to just have a great big party and make everyone happy? Or are we going to take kind of a more controversial route or what? But no one's giving back the money. And someone has to pay for it. Or we'll discontinue these opening ceremonies and just let people walk into a stadium. Okay, so the goal of one of these opening ceremonies is to present culture as it is today, but also how it has evolved over time. So it can make sense to hint on some things in the past, but also present day great things, also present day concerns. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'm going to dig back into the article just a little bit. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, no, I'm going to jump back to this. All right, so I just want to pull a few more things out of our wonderful New York Times article. So, okay, actually, I'm going to skim over a lot of it because you've already touched on it in some of the comments you made. And exactly what you were saying in the back just now was, I think, a credit to the organizers about what they were going for. And so the article says that you had, at many points, masses of dancers in multicolored, big-haired mosh pit, representing both divisions in society as well as the diversity. So you have kind of people doing their own thing, and at the same time, as a whole, doing something interesting. Which, that is what I want to share. If you've used Twitter, you can follow me at Mariusz, edu, and the hashtag, which is associated with my book, as well as a lot of the work, is hashtag right to be different. And the whole idea is that people can be different, and they have a right to be. And in that same way, they still can all together create some kind of unified country, place, classroom, school, and so on. But that people do have that right to be different, and when we don't allow that for whatever reason, that's when we take away components of people's identity. So anyway, that's me. Notice the Tuesday Times Roundtable. I haven't been so active lately, but it's a good person to follow, I promise. I don't have Instagram. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll work on it for you. But next year, Instagram. Is that what the youth is using now? Okay. There'll be another one next year. Well, I'll do my best. I'll figure it out. I just wanted to pull from the book basically what I just said, that really, again, if you believe in multiculturalism or if you believe in a society where people can be different and at the same, that although those are opposing ideas, that people should be treated the same or equitably, but at the same time be treated differently in recognition that people are different. Like you can't just close your eyes and pretend everyone is the same because they're not. We all have different histories, we have different components of our identity, we have different needs because of those things, and so all that falls into a redefined conception of education and multicultural education in particular. Okay, back to the article. What else can we pull out? Shall we talk about Giselle? So, I apologize for those watching at home, all the clicking. But, so in our article, we have the critic saying, the ceremony's most striking moment, however, involved a lone figure on a bare stage, the Brazilian model Gisele Bündchen taking the longest catwalk ever. Do you have any thoughts about this? No, that's very interesting. So, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot on speaking on behalf of all Brazilians. But is Gisele as famous there as she is in the US, for example? Not as famous. Okay, interesting. All right, what else? I don't know, I'm just asking, and that we also would have to fact check. Gisele is from Brazil. Yes, go ahead. Okay, and that's true. I believe it was the last one in her career, like for a public show of some kind. Okay, so that's about her. What about, so we just had, and we in that picture still, the focus is showing about how diverse and how happening and how inclusive Brazilian society is. And then the selection of Gisele to represent kind of the most beautiful, perhaps, or the ideal Brazilian woman. Some critics had something to say about that. Oh, I like that you said that. Okay, good. Okay, so one thing that we can agree is that Gisele Bündchen is very successful as a model. And I think that's definitely part of the rationale for why they included her. She is from Brazil. She is competing with the European models. Some would argue, why can she compete with them? Good. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm not digging for any point in particular. We're unpacking. We're just thinking about it. We're analyzing what others have said. We're thinking about, do we really care about that or not? What are the perspectives that are being brought to the table? And in our article, although they could have written about many, many things, one thing that they chose really to point out was this. So is it because that gets more readership? What? We don't know. So the last little section I think I want to end on in the last few minutes is the idea that not only do we watch these things, events like the opening ceremonies, we watch TV, we watch what gets presented to us, but we also watch them through different lenses, through lenses of media that present them to us in a certain way. Even in this newspaper report on it, right? We're getting an analysis filtered through someone, through their particular opinion. Do any of you, what's the name of the author? Mike Hale. Does anyone know him? Perhaps if we did know him, some of you might be like, oh, he's my best friend. I really trust what he says. Great taste. Others you might use some kind of profanity to say like, no, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But people are people, and so journalists are people too, and their own biases come out in certain things. And so we always have to be questioning, unpacking, and looking at all those different viewpoints and drawing our own conclusions. So, if I get to the end, Eric, I think you should get a new computer. I just wanted to end with really the first sentence of the article. So it started with this. Brazil's signature contribution to world culture is its popular music, and the characteristic mood of that music is the melancholy yearning called saudade. Am I saying that okay? Okay. That is not the mood NBC wants you in. And NBC, of course, is the broadcaster of the opening ceremony, while you're watching its coverage of the 2016 Rio Olympics, however. So, we have people who worked really, really hard to make this display. They created their fabulous website for you to go and read. And now NBC, Matt Lauer, Meredith Vieira, they come in and they're like, no, you need to feel like you're at the party. And actually there's some commentary in the article about downplaying certain aspects, not covering other things at all, and just making you feel like life is great, let's have fun. What is your takeaway about that? Oh, okay, so that's interesting. A lot of things. One, maybe conspiracy is a little strong, but certainly there's another they. They, media. Who are these people that control and make these decisions about what we audiences get to see or the way that they talk to us or what they want us to know? And I liked exactly what you said about sometimes what we really want to know or what you personally might find most interesting is what's not being said or what's being kept from you for whatever reason. So what's your takeaway to that? What are you supposed to do in the future? Control, I would say, yeah, media control or media literacy, we would call it in education too. Like, how do you read what the media is showing you? Like, they're showing you things. Do you take it as facts? Do you take it as truth? Do you take it as kind of truth? Do you question it? Depends on what? Okay, that's a beautiful point. So I'm just going to wrap it all up by saying thank you so much for your really excellent participation. And what all your comments, I think, are really bringing out is that your own awareness as a student here is that you personally have the abilities to really start taking things apart yourself and making your own conclusions. And if you then can also navigate yourself to positions of leadership, you have the power to make those decisions that other people are making for you. So I look forward to when you write to me in 30 years and you're like in charge of everything and you say thanks, like, okay, I'm really proud of you in advance. So good luck. Thank you so much for coming today, and really thank you for the awesome participation.